The moment when truth silences the room begins by describing a situation that many chosen ones recognize deeply, even if they did not fully understand it at the time it happened. There are moments in life when a person speaks calmly about something they have observed, something they sensed developing long before it became visible to others. The chosen one often finds themselves in this position. They notice patterns in behavior, tensions in conversations, or shifts in situations that others overlook. Because of this awareness, they may speak carefully about what they see, not to prove themselves right, but to express concern or clarity about what may happen next. Yet in the beginning, these observations are rarely received with enthusiasm. People may dismiss the chosen one's words, assuming that the situation is being misunderstood or exaggerated. Some might respond with skepticism, questioning why the chosen one sees problems or possibilities that others do not recognize. This reaction can create moments where the chosen one feels isolated in their perspective, as though they are describing something invisible to the people around them. However, what makes this experience unique is that the chosen one does not rely on immediate validation to maintain their clarity. Instead of forcing others to agree, they often step back and allow time to reveal what they already understood. Over time, events begin unfolding in ways that mirror the insight the chosen one expressed earlier. Situations that once seemed harmless begin showing the very dynamics the chosen one noticed from the beginning. Conversations change tone, outcomes shift, and people slowly realize that the observations they once dismissed were not exaggerations at all. In that moment, something remarkable happens. The people who previously challenged or questioned the chosen one suddenly find themselves without words. The arguments they once used lose their strength, because reality has quietly confirmed the truth. What once felt like a disagreement turns into a moment of realization. The room grows silent, not because the chosen one demanded attention, but because the evidence has become undeniable. This is the moment when truth speaks more clearly than any debate ever could. The chosen one does not need to raise their voice or repeat their argument. Their earlier clarity now stands on its own. And in that silence, the people around them begin recognizing something important. The chosen one was not simply expressing an opinion. They were seeing something others had not yet learned how to see. The early days. When your insight was dismissed, begins by returning to a stage in the chosen one's journey that often feels confusing and isolating when it is happening. This is the period where the chosen one first begins noticing things that others around them either cannot see or simply refuse to acknowledge. It does not begin dramatically. Instead, it unfolds through quiet observations, small inconsistencies, subtle patterns in behavior, conversations, and circumstances that slowly form a clearer picture in the chosen one's mind. The chosen one might notice how certain situations repeat themselves in predictable ways, or how certain individuals behave differently when no one else is paying attention. They may recognize emotional tensions beneath friendly conversations, or sense the direction a situation is moving, long before anyone openly discusses it. At first, these insights appear as quiet thoughts rather than declarations. The chosen one may test their understanding internally, asking themselves whether they are interpreting the situation correctly. They may even hesitate to speak because they know that describing something others cannot yet see can easily be misunderstood. Yet eventually, the chosen one feels compelled to express what they observe. They may share their thoughts calmly, explaining what they believe might happen, or what underlying issue may be developing. In many cases, this is not done dramatically or confrontationally. It often happens through careful conversation, where the chosen one simply points out what they have noticed. However, the reaction they receive is rarely the validation they might hope for. Instead, people respond with uncertainty or dismissal. Some may laugh lightly and assume the chosen one is overthinking the situation. Others may reassure themselves that everything is fine, and that the chosen one is imagining problems that do not exist. In environments where people prefer comfort over clarity, insight can feel uncomfortable because it challenges the illusion that everything is under control. For this reason, the chosen one's early observations are often treated as unnecessary concern rather than meaningful awareness. This stage can be emotionally challenging because the chosen one begins realizing that seeing something early does not automatically mean others will listen. People naturally trust what feels familiar, and if a situation appears stable on the surface, they may resist the idea that deeper dynamics are unfolding. The chosen one's insight therefore collides with the natural human desire to avoid uncertainty. Instead of investigating the observation, many people simply dismiss it. For the chosen one, this can create a strange emotional experience. On one hand, they feel confident in what they have observed because the patterns are clear to them. On the other hand, they face the reality that their perspective is not being taken seriously. This tension can lead to moments where the chosen one questions whether speaking up was the right decision. They may wonder whether they should remain silent in the future rather than risk being misunderstood again. Yet something important begins forming during this stage of dismissal. The chosen one learns the difference between validation and clarity. Validation depends on other people agreeing with them, while clarity comes from understanding what they see, regardless of whether others accept it immediately. Over time, the chosen one begins realizing that clarity does not always require approval. Sometimes, the truth of a situation reveals itself only after time passes and circumstances unfold naturally. This realization encourages the chosen one to step back rather than argue endlessly for recognition. They understand that forcing people to see what they cannot yet perceive often leads to unnecessary conflict. Instead, the chosen one adopts a quieter approach. They continue observing carefully, continuing to learn from the patterns around them without constantly defending their perspective. This patience becomes one of the most powerful skills the chosen one develops. Instead of exhausting themselves trying to convince others, they allow events to unfold at their own pace. During this time, the chosen one may still experience moments of doubt. Being dismissed repeatedly can create the feeling of standing alone in one's understanding. Yet the chosen one gradually learns that insight often arrives earlier than acceptance. People need time to process information that challenges their expectations. What appears obvious to the chosen one may feel invisible to others until circumstances change. This delay between observation and recognition becomes part of the chosen one's journey. It teaches them how to remain calm even when their perspective is questioned. It also strengthens their ability to communicate thoughtfully rather than emotionally. Over time, the chosen one becomes more confident in their observations because they see the patterns repeating again and again. Situations unfold in ways that confirm the early signals they noticed. Conversations develop along the lines they predicted. Behaviors they questioned earlier begin revealing their true intentions. These moments do not immediately lead to public recognition, but they strengthen the chosen one's internal understanding. They realize that insight is not about proving others wrong, but about understanding reality more clearly. This awareness gradually transforms how they approach their role within the environment around them. Instead of seeking approval for every observation, they focus on maintaining clarity and integrity in their actions. They speak when it feels necessary, but they do not depend on immediate agreement. The dismissal they once experienced becomes an unexpected form of training. It teaches the chosen one emotional resilience and patience. It teaches them how to remain composed even when their perspective is misunderstood. Most importantly, It prepares them for the moment when time finally reveals what they saw from the beginning. Because when that moment arrives, the chosen one will not need to argue or repeat themselves. The patterns they observed will have already unfolded in front of everyone. And the same people who once dismissed their insight will find themselves remembering the words the chosen one spoke earlier. In that moment, the chosen one realizes something important about the early days of dismissal. Those moments were not failures of communication. They were simply part of the natural rhythm between perception and recognition. Insight often arrives quietly before others are ready to hear it. The chosen one's ability to hold that insight patiently is what allows them to remain steady while the world around them gradually catches up to the truth they already understood. Why chosen ones notice patterns. First begins by revealing something many chosen ones eventually come to understand about themselves. Their ability to see patterns before others is not random, and it is not simply the result of being more observant in a superficial way. It develops through a combination of awareness, experience, emotional sensitivity, and a willingness to pay attention to details that many people ignore. While others may move quickly through conversations, situations, and relationships without questioning the deeper dynamics beneath them, the chosen one tends to slow down and observe carefully. They listen not only to the words people speak, but also to the tone behind those words. They notice shifts in behavior that appear small, but signal something important. They recognize when actions contradict promises, when emotions reveal hidden intentions, and when patterns begin repeating themselves in ways that suggest a larger story is unfolding beneath the surface. This ability to detect patterns often begins long before the chosen one realizes its significance. During earlier stages of life, they may simply feel that they notice things others overlook. They may sense when a situation feels unstable, even when everyone else appears comfortable. They may feel uneasy about decisions that seem obvious to others, because something within the environment does not align properly. At first, these impressions can feel confusing, because the chosen one may not yet have the language or confidence to explain what they perceive. Yet over time, these small signals begin forming a clearer structure in their mind. The chosen one starts connecting past experiences with present observations, recognizing how certain behaviors lead to predictable outcomes. This process gradually strengthens their intuition and analytical ability at the same time. What others describe as instinct is often the result of careful pattern recognition, built through experience and reflection. Another reason the chosen one sees patterns earlier than others lies in the way they engage with situations emotionally and intellectually. Many people prefer simplicity. When a situation appears stable or comfortable, they accept that appearance without questioning what may be developing beneath it. The chosen one, however, tends to remain curious even when everything appears normal on the surface. Curiosity leads them to ask questions internally that others may not consider. Why did someone react that way? Why did that conversation suddenly shift direction? Why did that decision feel rushed or forced? These questions encourage the chosen one to examine the underlying structure of events rather than accepting them at face value. This deeper engagement with reality allows them to recognize patterns before those patterns become obvious to everyone else. Emotional intelligence also plays a powerful role in this ability. Chosen ones often possess a heightened sensitivity to the emotional atmosphere around them. They notice how people influence each other's behavior, how tensions build gradually within groups, and how unspoken expectations shape decisions. Because they pay attention to emotional signals as well as logical details, they gain access to a more complete picture of what is happening. When someone speaks confidently while hiding discomfort, the chosen one senses the contradiction. When a group agrees publicly but carries quiet disagreement beneath the surface, the chosen one recognizes the tension. These observations allow them to anticipate changes in situations before those changes become visible. In many ways, the chosen one becomes a quiet observer of human dynamics, learning from each interaction without needing to dominate the conversation. Experience further strengthens this ability over time. Each challenge the chosen one faces becomes another opportunity to study patterns of behavior and consequence. They notice how certain decisions consistently lead to conflict, while others create stability. They see how honesty builds trust over time, while manipulation eventually reveals itself through inconsistency. They observe how individuals respond to pressure, and how those responses reveal character more clearly than calm circumstances ever could. With each experience, their understanding grows deeper. What once felt like instinct becomes a form of knowledge grounded in repeated observation. This knowledge allows the chosen one to anticipate developments that others fail to recognize because they have not yet connected the underlying patterns. Another important factor behind the chosen one's pattern recognition is their willingness to sit with uncertainty rather than rushing toward quick conclusions. Many people feel uncomfortable when situations lack immediate clarity. They want answers quickly, even if those answers oversimplify the reality they are facing. The chosen one approaches uncertainty differently. Instead of forcing an explanation, they allow time to reveal more information. This patience creates space for patterns to emerge naturally. When someone waits long enough and observes carefully, relationships between events become easier to see. The chosen one learns that clarity often develops gradually rather than instantly. This patience gives them an advantage because they do not panic when situations appear confusing. They remain calm and continue gathering insight until the larger picture becomes visible. Yet this ability can also create a strange experience for the chosen one. Because they see patterns earlier than others, they sometimes speak about possibilities that people around them are not ready to hear. When they explain what they believe may happen, or describe a dynamic that others have not yet noticed, their perspective can sound unusual or overly cautious. People may assume the chosen one is worrying unnecessarily or imagining connections that do not exist. This reaction is not always malicious. Often, it simply reflects the fact that recognition arrives later for most people than it does for the chosen one. What the chosen one sees as a developing pattern still appears isolated or harmless to others who have not yet noticed the same signals. This difference in timing explains why the chosen one's insights are sometimes dismissed initially. The room may respond with skepticism because the pattern has not fully revealed itself yet. Yet, as time passes, the connections the chosen one noticed begin appearing more clearly. Events unfold along the same lines they predicted earlier. Behaviors repeat in ways that confirm the underlying structure they described. In those moments, people start remembering the chosen one's earlier observations and realizing that what once sounded uncertain was actually an early glimpse of the truth. This is why the chosen one's ability to recognize patterns becomes so powerful. It allows them to prepare emotionally and mentally for situations long before those situations become obvious to others. They are rarely surprised by outcomes because they have already seen the early signals leading toward those outcomes. And although this ability may sometimes feel isolating in the moment, it ultimately becomes one of the chosen one's greatest strengths. It allows them to navigate complex environments with clarity and composure, even when others are still trying to understand what is happening. Over time, people begin recognizing that the chosen one's insight is not guesswork, but the result of careful observation, emotional awareness, and patient reflection. Their ability to see patterns early becomes a quiet form of wisdom that shapes how they move through the world and how others eventually learn to listen when they speak. The moment when reality confirms what you said begins with a shift that many chosen ones recognize as both quiet and powerful. For a long time, their insight existed only as words spoken earlier, ideas expressed in conversation that were often met with hesitation or dismissal. They had described patterns, explained possibilities, and pointed out dynamics that others could not yet see clearly. In those moments, the chosen one did not speak loudly or dramatically. They simply shared what they understood from careful observation. Yet because the environment around them had not yet reached the same conclusion, their words remained suspended in uncertainty. People listened politely or skeptically, then returned to their routines, believing that the chosen one was overanalyzing the situation. For the chosen one, this period required patience. They had already seen enough signs to feel confident in their understanding, but they also knew that clarity often arrives later for those who are not watching as closely. So they stepped back and allowed events to unfold naturally, trusting that time has a way of revealing what words alone cannot prove. As days or weeks pass, small developments begin appearing that reflect the exact concerns the chosen one described earlier. At first, these changes may seem subtle. A conversation shifts in tone, a promise fails to materialize, or a situation that once appeared stable begins showing cracks. People may not immediately connect these developments to the earlier warnings they heard from the chosen one. They simply react to each new event as it happens. But for the chosen one, the pattern is already familiar. They recognize the sequence because they saw its early stages long before the outcome became visible. As the situation continues evolving, the signals grow stronger. Behaviors repeat in ways that confirm the structure the chosen one described. Decisions that once seemed harmless begin creating the consequences the chosen one predicted. Gradually, the environment reaches a point where the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Individuals who once dismissed the chosen one's insight begin recalling the conversations they had earlier. They remember the careful explanations, the calm warnings, the moments when the chosen one suggested that a certain outcome might occur if the situation continued developing in the same direction. Suddenly, those earlier words feel different. What once sounded uncertain now appears remarkably accurate. This realization often arrives quietly, but powerfully. Instead of responding with argument, many people fall into silence as they connect the dots between past observations and present reality. In that moment, the chosen one does not need to repeat themselves or prove anything. The unfolding events speak clearly enough on their own. For the chosen one, this experience can feel both validating and reflective. On one hand, it confirms that their ability to recognize patterns and understand dynamics is real. The clarity they trusted earlier was not imagination, but insight formed through careful attention. On the other hand, the chosen one rarely celebrates this moment with arrogance. Their purpose was never to prove others wrong, but to understand what was happening and prepare for it. Watching the situation unfold exactly as expected can even bring a sense of quiet calm rather than triumph. The chosen one simply acknowledges that reality has revealed what they already saw forming beneath the surface. For the people around them, however, this moment can feel far more dramatic. The silence that fills the room is not just the absence of words, but the presence of realization. Individuals who once challenged the chosen one's perspective suddenly recognize that their earlier skepticism may have been misplaced. Some may feel embarrassed for dismissing the insight so quickly. Others may struggle to explain how the chosen one understood the situation long before it became obvious. In many cases, the reaction is not confrontation, but quiet reflection. people look at the chosen one differently, recognizing that the clarity they once doubted now stands supported by undeniable evidence. What makes this moment especially powerful is that it transforms the chosen one's voice within the environment. Their earlier words carried uncertainty because they challenged the prevailing understanding of the situation. Now, those same words carry weight because reality has confirmed their accuracy. When someone demonstrates insight that proves reliable over time, others begin listening more carefully the next time they speak. Trust begins forming gradually, not because the chosen one demanded recognition, but because their perspective has shown itself to be grounded in observation and truth. This shift in perception does not happen instantly for everyone. Some people take longer to accept that the chosen one's understanding was correct. Yet the unfolding events make it increasingly difficult to deny what has become clear. Over time, the chosen one's earlier insight becomes part of the collective memory of the situation. People begin referring back to those conversations when discussing what happened. They remember how the chosen one described the pattern before anyone else recognized it. In doing so, they acknowledge a deeper truth about awareness and patience. The chosen one did not rush to prove their point or argue endlessly for validation. Instead, they trusted that clarity would reveal itself through the natural progression of events. This patience becomes one of the most important lessons in the chosen one's journey. It shows that insight does not always need immediate agreement to remain valid. Sometimes, truth requires time to become visible, and the ability to wait calmly for that moment is part of what distinguishes genuine understanding from mere opinion. As the chosen one reflects on this experience, they begin recognizing that such moments will likely appear again in the future. Their ability to see patterns early is not limited to a single situation, but forms part of how they interact with the world. Each time reality confirms their observation, their confidence in their own perception grows stronger. Yet with that confidence comes responsibility. The chosen one understands that insight should be used carefully and thoughtfully, not as a tool for superiority, but as a way to help others navigate complex situations with greater clarity. In this way, the moment when reality confirms what the chosen one said becomes more than simple validation. It becomes a turning point that reveals the power of patience, observation, and quiet certainty. The chosen one learns that truth does not need loud defense to stand strong. When time aligns with clarity, even the loudest doubts eventually fade into silence, leaving only the undeniable evidence of what was understood long before anyone else could see it. Why your accuracy leaves people speechless begins with a realization that may seem simple on the surface, but carries deeper meaning when it unfolds in real life. When someone has been questioned, doubted, or even quietly dismissed for expressing an insight, there is usually an expectation from others that the situation will eventually prove them wrong. Many people assume that confidence in an observation must be arrogance or overconfidence, especially when that observation challenges what others believe to be stable or obvious. Because of this assumption, those who doubted the chosen one often feel comfortable pushing back, arguing, or even mocking the idea that the chosen one could see something they cannot. At the time, those reactions may seem natural, but they are also built on a fragile foundation. When reality begins unfolding in exactly the way the chosen one described earlier, the people who once spoke with certainty suddenly find themselves facing something they did not anticipate. The silence that follows is not accidental. It is the result of a shift in understanding that leaves very little room for argument. People become speechless because the structure of their earlier confidence collapses in a moment of undeniable clarity. One reason this silence occurs is that many individuals rely on social agreement to support their opinions. When several people believe the same thing, it becomes easier to assume that belief must be correct. In earlier conversations, the chosen one may have stood alone while others repeated the same reassuring perspective to each other. This repetition created the illusion that the chosen one's insight was unlikely or exaggerated. Yet when the predicted outcome appears, the dynamic changes immediately. The group that once supported each other's skepticism now finds themselves confronted with evidence they did not expect. Without the comfort of shared doubt, their certainty disappears quickly. What remains is a quiet recognition that the chosen one's perspective carried a level of awareness that had been overlooked. Another reason the chosen one's accuracy creates such silence is that many people struggle to respond gracefully when they realize they were mistaken. Admitting that someone else understood the situation more clearly can feel uncomfortable, especially if earlier reactions involve dismissing or challenging that person's viewpoint. Instead of immediately acknowledging the shift, people often pause as they process what has happened. That pause can feel like a room suddenly losing its voice. Conversations slow down, and the energy that once fueled debate fades into reflection. The chosen one does not need to say anything in that moment, because the unfolding events speak clearly enough. Reality has already delivered the message that words once struggled to communicate. The chosen one's calm presence during this stage often amplifies the effect even more. Rather than celebrating their accuracy loudly or reminding everyone of the earlier disagreement, they remain composed. This composure can be surprising to those who expected a reaction of triumph or vindication. Instead, they encounter someone who seems unsurprised by the outcome, almost as if the moment was anticipated long before it arrived. That calmness reinforces the impression that the chosen one's insight was not based on guesswork or emotional impulse, but on thoughtful observation. The absence of arrogance makes the silence in the room even deeper, because it removes the possibility of turning the situation into a confrontation. Without confrontation, people are left with their own realization, rather than an argument to resist. The chosen one's accuracy also changes the way others interpret past conversations. Words that once seemed uncertain or speculative suddenly appear precise and meaningful. People begin remembering the details of what the chosen one said earlier and comparing them to what is happening now. Each connection strengthens the realization that the chosen one's understanding was grounded in something real. This process often happens quietly within each person's mind. Instead of announcing their realization publicly, they reflect internally, connecting the dots between past warnings and present events. The silence, therefore, becomes a form of acknowledgement. It represents the moment when resistance fades and understanding begins replacing doubt. For the chosen one, this moment carries an important lesson about patience and integrity. They learn that being correct does not always require immediate recognition. Insight can exist long before the environment around them is ready to see it. When that recognition finally arrives, it often appears suddenly because the necessary evidence has finally become visible. The chosen one's earlier restraint becomes a crucial part of why the moment carries such weight. By choosing not to argue endlessly or demand validation, they allowed reality to reveal the truth naturally. This approach protects their credibility and strengthens the impact of their words. If they had reacted defensively during earlier disagreements, the outcome might have been interpreted as a personal victory rather than a demonstration of clarity. Instead, the silence now surrounding the situation highlights the difference between emotional debate and genuine understanding. The people who once challenged the chosen one may begin viewing them differently after this moment. Their voice carries a new level of respect because it has proven reliable when it mattered most. Conversations that once dismissed their perspective now included carefully. People listen more attentively when the chosen one shares insight about future developments. This shift does not happen because the chosen one demands authority, but because the environment has witnessed the accuracy of their awareness. Over time, this reputation for clarity becomes one of the chosen one's strongest forms of influence. They become known as someone who sees patterns early and expresses them thoughtfully. The silence that once filled the room after reality confirmed their words becomes a memory that shapes how others respond in the future. Yet the chosen one understands that such moments are not about collecting recognition or proving superiority. Their purpose remains the same as before: to observe carefully, speak honestly when necessary, and remain patient when others need time to understand. The silence created by their accuracy is not a victory over others, but a reminder of the quiet power of truth. When insight is grounded in observation and integrity, it eventually reveals itself through events that no one can deny. And in those moments, the chosen one discovers something important about the nature of clarity itself. It does not shout for attention or compete for approval. Instead, it waits calmly until the world around it catches up. And when that moment arrives, the truth speaks so clearly that even the loudest doubts fade into silence. Why silence often means recognition begins with a subtle shift that many chosen ones eventually learn to recognize. When people stop arguing, stop interrupting, and stop trying to prove a different version of events, something deeper than simple quiet is taking place. The absence of noise does not always mean that others have nothing to say. More often, it means they have reached a point where speaking no longer serves the position they once defended. Earlier, the environment around the chosen one may have been filled with explanations, excuses, or confident opinions from people who believed they fully understood the situation. Those voices carried certainty because they had not yet encountered evidence strong enough to challenge their assumptions. But once reality begins aligning with what the chosen one described earlier, the energy of those conversations changes dramatically. The arguments fade, not because the chosen one has forced them to stop, but because the structure supporting them has quietly collapsed. Silence in this moment becomes a form of recognition. It is the mind's natural response when a person suddenly understands that someone else saw the truth before they did. This recognition does not always appear as a public apology or immediate praise. Human nature often moves more slowly than that. Instead, the realization unfolds internally as individuals review their earlier reactions and compare them with the outcome that has now become visible. They remember the moments when the chosen one attempted to explain what they were seeing. They remember the calm tone that accompanied those explanations, and the patience that allowed the chosen one to speak without hostility. As these memories return, people begin understanding that the chosen one was not trying to dominate the conversation or claim superiority. They were simply sharing an observation that had formed through careful attention. Once that understanding settles into place, many people choose silence rather than continuing a discussion that no longer supports their earlier viewpoint. In that silence, there is often a quiet respect that was not present before. For the chosen one, this stage can feel both peaceful and revealing. The environment that once felt crowded with skepticism now feels open and reflective. Instead of constant resistance, there is space for people to reconsider what they have witnessed. This change does not require confrontation or correction. The chosen one does not need to remind anyone of the earlier disagreement, because the unfolding events have already done that work. Silence becomes the natural bridge between past doubt and present awareness. It is the moment when understanding begins replacing resistance. Many chosen ones discover that this kind of silence carries more meaning than any spoken acknowledgement. Words can sometimes be influenced by pride or the desire to save face. But silence often reflects genuine thought. When people stop speaking and simply observe what has happened, they are processing a truth that has become undeniable. They are adjusting their perspective without needing to defend their earlier position. In this way, silence becomes an honest response rather than a performative one. The chosen one learns that recognition does not always arrive in dramatic form. It can appear quietly, like a shift in atmosphere that signals a deeper change in perception. Another reason silence becomes so powerful in this moment is that it allows the chosen one's integrity to stand on its own. If the chosen one were to immediately celebrate being right or demand acknowledgement, the focus might shift back into conflict. Instead, their calm acceptance of the situation reinforces the credibility that their earlier insight created. People notice the restraint as much as they notice the accuracy. They see someone who does not use clarity as a weapon, but as a tool for understanding. This combination of insight and composure creates a powerful impression that lasts far longer than a brief moment of argument ever could. Over time, this experience shapes how others respond to the chosen one's voice in future situations. The memory of that earlier silence remains present whenever the chosen one shares another observation or prediction. People who once rushed to challenge the chosen one may now pause and listen more carefully. They remember how quickly their earlier certainty dissolved when events unfolded exactly as the chosen one described. That memory encourages a new level of openness. Instead of dismissing the chosen one's perspective, they consider it thoughtfully, recognizing that there may be insight behind the words. The chosen one does not need to remind them of this lesson. The silence itself has already taught it. For the chosen one, this stage also deepens their understanding of leadership and influence. They realize that true influence rarely depends on dominating conversations or forcing agreement. Instead, it grows through consistency, patience, and the quiet confidence that comes from observing reality carefully. When insight is shared calmly and proven accurate through time, it builds a foundation that words alone could never create. The chosen one begins trusting this process more fully. They understand that their role is not to convince everyone immediately, but to remain honest in their observations and allow events to reveal the truth when the time is right. Silence then becomes part of the rhythm of that process. It marks the moment when understanding begins catching up with what was already known. There is also a deeper emotional lesson hidden within this stage. Many chosen ones spend years feeling misunderstood because their perspective develops ahead of the environment around them. They may wonder why others cannot see what appears obvious from their point of view. When silence finally replaces the earlier resistance, it becomes a reminder that timing plays an important role in perception. People often need to experience the unfolding of events before they can fully understand a pattern that someone else recognized earlier. The chosen one learns not to resent that delay. Instead, they see it as part of how awareness spreads through a community. Insight begins with one voice, but eventually becomes visible to many once reality provides confirmation. As the chosen one reflects on this process, they begin appreciating the quiet strength that patience provides. They recognize that their journey is not defined by winning arguments, but by maintaining clarity even when others cannot yet see it. Silence becomes a sign that the environment is evolving, that people are beginning to understand what once seemed uncertain. In those moments, the chosen one feels a sense of calm satisfaction, not because they have proven themselves superior, but because truth has found its way into the conversation without force. That is the deeper meaning behind the silence that follows their accuracy. It is not empty or uncomfortable, It is the sound of recognition forming within the minds of others. A quiet acknowledgement that the chosen one's vision was grounded in something real all along. How your clarity begins. Changing the room begins in a moment that feels almost invisible at first, yet carries a quiet force that slowly reshapes the entire atmosphere around you. Earlier, when your voice first entered the conversation, the environment may have been filled with noise. Opinions clashed, people defended their positions, and discussions felt more like competitions than searches for understanding. In that stage, your words were just one voice among many. And even though your insight carried depth, it was often buried beneath the momentum of louder reactions. But once events unfold in ways that confirm what you described earlier, something subtle begins changing in the room. It is not dramatic or explosive. Instead, it happens gradually, like a shift in gravity that people feel before they can fully explain it. Conversations slow down, tones soften, and the constant urge to challenge every observation begins fading. What you notice first is that people start paying attention in a different way. Instead of interrupting or dismissing your perspective, they pause when you speak. They watch more closely, listening not just to your words, but to the reasoning behind them. This change does not come from fear or pressure. It comes from recognition. They have already seen that your earlier insight aligned with reality, and that experience alters how they approach the next conversation. When someone demonstrates clarity that later proves accurate, it naturally reshapes the dynamic around them. People begin sensing that there is something worth paying attention to, something grounded in observation rather than impulse. That realization begins transforming the emotional temperature of the room. The same individuals who once rushed to debate your perspective now respond with curiosity. They may not always agree immediately, but they approach the discussion with more openness than before. This openness changes the rhythm of interaction. Conversations become less about proving someone wrong and more about understanding what might be unfolding beneath the surface. The chosen one often notices that others begin asking more thoughtful questions. Instead of dismissing your viewpoint, they invite you to explain how you arrived at it. They want to understand the pattern you saw, the signals you noticed, and the reasoning that guided your earlier conclusion. In this way, your clarity begins shaping the environment without any deliberate effort to control it. Influence emerges naturally from demonstrated understanding. Another transformation occurs in how people interpret silence itself. Earlier silence may have been uncomfortable, a pause filled with tension because disagreements had not yet resolved. Now, silence carries a different quality. It becomes reflective rather than defensive. When you finish speaking, people take a moment to consider your words before responding. That pause indicates that your perspective has gained weight within the conversation. It is no longer treated as speculation, but as a viewpoint worth evaluating carefully. Over time, this shift begins affecting the entire structure of group interactions. People start observing situations more closely themselves, because your earlier insight showed them how easily important patterns can be overlooked. Your presence quietly encourages greater awareness among those around you. They begin noticing details they might have ignored before, asking themselves questions about motives, consequences, and long-term outcomes. In this way, your clarity spreads beyond your own voice. It becomes part of how the room itself begins thinking. The chosen one often discovers that leadership emerges in moments like this without any formal declaration. Leadership does not always appear through authority or position. Sometimes, it grows from trust earned through consistent perception and integrity. When people witness someone maintaining composure, speaking thoughtfully, and allowing truth to reveal itself through time, they begin seeing that person as a source of guidance, even if no official title exists. This kind of influence is especially powerful because it develops organically. It is not demanded or imposed. It arises from the environment's recognition that your perspective has proven reliable when it mattered most. As this process continues, the emotional landscape around you becomes calmer and more balanced. The earlier tension that surrounded your voice dissolves because the need to challenge it has faded. People begin realizing that your goal was never to dominate discussions, but to bring clarity to them. That understanding transforms how they respond to your presence. Instead of anticipating conflict, they anticipate insight. This expectation changes the tone of future conversations before they even begin. The chosen one may also notice that individuals who once remained silent during earlier debates now feel more comfortable engaging. They recognize that your approach values observation and thoughtful dialogue, rather than aggressive argument. This realization invites a broader range of perspectives into the conversation. Ironically, the clarity that once isolated you now begins creating a more open environment for everyone. When people feel safe exploring ideas without immediate dismissal, the quality of discussion improves for the entire group. In this way, your earlier patience becomes a catalyst for collective growth. Yet the chosen one understands that this influence must be handled with care. Clarity can easily become arrogance if it is used to dominate rather than guide. The reason your insight changed the room was not simply because you were correct. It was because you carried that understanding with humility and restraint. You allowed time to demonstrate the truth instead of forcing others to accept it prematurely. Maintaining that humility becomes essential as your voice gains greater influence. The moment clarity turns into pride, the balance that created trust can begin to erode. The chosen one, therefore, remains grounded in the same principle that guided them from the beginning. Observation first, expression second, and patience always. When you speak, you continue doing so with calm intention rather than urgency. You understand that your role is not to control the conversation, but to illuminate what might otherwise remain hidden. This mindset keeps your influence aligned with integrity rather than ego. Over time, the environment adapts to this new dynamic. People begin recognizing that moments of disagreement no longer need to escalate into conflict because the conversation now includes a voice capable of bringing perspective and balance. Your presence becomes a stabilizing force within the room. Individuals may still hold different opinions, but they approach those differences with greater thoughtfulness because the environment has learned the value of careful observation. What once felt chaotic gradually transforms into a space where ideas can evolve through reflection rather than confrontation. The chosen one eventually realizes that the greatest change in the room is not the silence that followed your earlier accuracy, but the awareness that emerged afterward. People begin paying closer attention to the patterns unfolding around them because they have witnessed how easily important signals can be overlooked. Your clarity served as a demonstration of what attentive perception can achieve. It showed that understanding is not reserved for special circumstances, but can grow from simple willingness to observe carefully and think deeply. As this awareness spreads, the room becomes more thoughtful and more reflective. Conversations gain depth because participants are no longer reacting purely to immediate emotion. Instead, they consider the broader context and potential consequences of what they discuss. The chosen one sees that their earlier insight has become part of the environment's collective learning process. What began as one voice speaking against the current has gradually reshaped the current itself. The most remarkable aspect of this transformation is how quietly it occurred. There was no dramatic announcement declaring that the chosen one's perspective had changed the room. The shift unfolded through observation, patience, and the steady unfolding of truth. One moment people were arguing confidently against your insight, and later those same individuals were pausing to consider your words carefully before responding. That difference represents the real power of clarity. It does not force attention through volume or authority. It earns attention through consistency and truth revealed over time. And as the chosen one continues walking forward, they recognize that every room they enter carries the potential for a similar transformation. Not because they intend to control the environment, but because clarity combined with patience has a way of reshaping spaces wherever it appears. The chosen one's voice becomes more than a statement of opinion. It becomes a quiet compass within the conversation, guiding attention toward what is real and meaningful. When that happens, the room itself begins aligning with a deeper level of awareness, and the chosen one understands that the true impact of their clarity was never about winning a single moment of silence. It was about awakening a new way of seeing for everyone present. When your voice becomes the reference point, begins with a quiet transformation that many chosen ones do not notice immediately. Earlier in your journey, your words may have felt like signals sent into uncertain space. You spoke from observation, intuition, and discernment. Yet the environment around you often treated those insights as opinions rather than guidance. People listened politely, questioned openly, or dismissed your perspective entirely because it challenged the assumptions they were comfortable holding. In those earlier moments, you were simply another voice within the conversation, sometimes even the most isolated one. Yet as time passed and events repeatedly unfolded in ways that confirmed what you had already seen forming beneath the surface, something subtle began shifting in how people interpreted your presence. Instead of hearing your voice as speculation, they started recognizing it as a form of orientation. Without realizing it at first, the room began using your perspective as a reference point for understanding what might be happening next. This change does not happen through dramatic recognition or sudden applause. It develops gradually through accumulated moments of accuracy. Each time reality aligns with what you had quietly described earlier, another layer of credibility forms around your words. People remember the conversations where your insight seemed unusual at the time, but later proved grounded in truth. Those memories begin influencing how they respond the next time you speak. Instead of reacting with immediate doubt, they pause to consider whether your perspective might reveal something important again. That pause marks the beginning of a profound shift in group dynamics. Your voice no longer competes for space in the conversation. It becomes a point of orientation that others consult when they are trying to understand the situation more clearly. What makes this transformation remarkable is that it occurs without you demanding authority or recognition. You did not step forward claiming superior understanding. Instead, you continued observing carefully, speaking honestly, and allowing time to reveal whether your insight carried weight. Because of that patience, the environment begins trusting your perspective organically. People who once argued against your observations now find themselves referencing them when discussing unfolding events. They recall earlier moments when you noticed patterns that others overlooked, and that memory shapes how they interpret your voice in the present. In this way, your influence grows through demonstrated clarity rather than imposed power. The chosen one often notices that conversations begin including phrases such as, "What do you think about this?" or "You noticed something like this before." These questions reveal that your perspective has moved from the edge of the discussion to its center of gravity. People begin turning toward you not because they feel obligated, but because they have learned that your observations often illuminate what others struggle to see. Your voice becomes a compass within the room, offering orientation whenever uncertainty appears. This role carries both opportunity and responsibility. Opportunity arises because your ability to perceive patterns allows you to guide conversations toward deeper understanding. Responsibility arises because influence requires integrity to remain meaningful. The chosen one understands that becoming a reference point does not mean controlling every discussion or claiming infallibility. Instead, it means continuing the same disciplined approach that created trust in the first place. Observing carefully, speaking thoughtfully, and remaining open to new information as situations evolve. One of the most interesting effects of this transformation is how it changes the emotional atmosphere around disagreement. Earlier debates may have felt tense because people believed their opinions needed to compete for dominance. Once your voice becomes a trusted reference point, the tone of disagreement begins softening. Individuals realize that conversations do not need to revolve around defending ego or preserving status. Instead, they can explore different possibilities together, knowing that the presence of a grounded perspective helps keep the discussion aligned with reality. In this environment, disagreement becomes a process of learning rather than conflict. Your clarity helps stabilize the conversation so that ideas can develop without collapsing into argument. The chosen one often reflects on how surprising this stage can feel. There was a time when speaking honestly created resistance, suspicion, or even isolation. Now, the same voice carries a level of attention that once seemed impossible. Yet the difference is not simply that people have changed their minds. The deeper change is that they have experienced the reliability of your perception firsthand. They watched how your earlier insights matched the unfolding of events, and that experience reshaped their understanding of your role within the group. What once seemed like an outsider's perspective now appears as a valuable source of awareness. This transformation can also inspire growth in others. When people witness someone consistently demonstrating clarity and patience, they begin developing those qualities themselves. They pay closer attention to patterns around them, reflect more carefully before forming conclusions, and approach conversations with greater humility. Your example encourages the room to evolve into a space where thoughtful observation becomes more common. In this way, your voice does more than guide discussions. It cultivates a culture of awareness that benefits everyone involved. The chosen one recognizes that this influence does not come from extraordinary power, but from disciplined perception. Anyone who observes carefully and speaks honestly can contribute to the same transformation. Yet not everyone maintains the patience required to let truth reveal itself through time. Many people feel tempted to argue aggressively or demand validation when their perspective is questioned. The chosen one's strength lies in resisting that temptation. By remaining composed and allowing events to confirm their insight naturally, they create an environment where recognition can grow without confrontation. As this stage continues developing, the chosen one becomes aware that their voice now carries the ability to redirect conversations when confusion arises. When discussions begin drifting toward speculation or emotional reaction, a thoughtful observation from you can bring attention back to what is actually unfolding. People listen because they have learned that your perspective often reveals the underlying structure of the situation. This does not mean that every prediction will be perfect or that every insight will be universally accepted. What matters is the pattern of clarity that others have witnessed over time. That pattern establishes your voice as a reliable point of reference, even when uncertainty remains. The chosen one also understands that maintaining this role requires continuous humility. The moment clarity becomes pride, the foundation of trust begins weakening. People respect your voice because it emerged through patience and honesty, not because you claimed authority over them. Preserving that trust means continuing to treat conversations as opportunities for understanding, rather than platforms for superiority. When you speak, You remain grounded in observation rather than ego. When you listen, you remain open to perspectives that may reveal new dimensions of the situation. This balance ensures that your influence remains constructive rather than dominating. Over time, the chosen one realizes that becoming a reference point is not the final stage of their journey, but the beginning of a deeper responsibility. With greater influence comes the opportunity to shape how people interpret complex situations and respond to uncertainty. Your words can calm confusion, illuminate hidden patterns, or encourage others to approach challenges with clarity rather than fear. This role transforms your voice from a simple expression of opinion into a tool for guiding collective awareness. The chosen one embraces this responsibility carefully, recognizing that leadership often emerges quietly through consistency rather than through titles or formal authority. Looking back on the earlier stages of your journey, the contrast becomes striking. There was a time when your insight felt like a solitary perspective struggling to be heard. Now that same voice helps orient the conversation whenever uncertainty appears. The silence that once followed your accurate observations has evolved into something even more meaningful: attentive listening and thoughtful engagement. People no longer fall silent because they are stunned by your correctness. They pause because they understand that your words often illuminate something important about what is unfolding. And as this realization spreads through the environment, your voice continues shaping the room, not through force or dominance, but through the quiet authority that grows from truth consistently revealed over time. When truth silences the noise, brings the entire journey back into focus by revealing something the chosen one may not have fully realized while living through each moment. At the beginning, your voice existed in a space where doubt was louder than understanding. When you first spoke about what you saw unfolding, the environment around you was filled with competing opinions, confident assumptions, and the natural resistance people feel when someone challenges the version of reality they have grown comfortable believing. In those early conversations, your words may have felt like small sparks of clarity entering a room full of noise. Some people listened politely, others reacted defensively, and a few dismissed the insight entirely because it arrived before they were ready to see what you had already recognized. Yet the chosen one did not allow that resistance to change the foundation of their voice. You continued observing, thinking, and speaking with a calm confidence that came not from ego, but from attention to detail. Instead of forcing others to accept your perspective, you allowed time to become the witness that eventually revealed what was true. As events unfolded and reality began aligning with the patterns you described earlier, the environment slowly transformed. The voices that once rushed to argue grew quieter. The same conversations that once dismissed your insight began revisiting it with curiosity. What once seemed like an isolated perspective gradually became a recognized point of clarity within the room. The silence that followed those moments of realization was not empty. It was filled with understanding that had finally caught up with truth. People became speechless not because they lacked words, but because they had reached a moment where words were no longer necessary to explain what had become obvious. For the chosen one, this transformation carried an important lesson about the nature of influence and truth. True clarity does not depend on immediate validation. It does not require loud defense or endless argument to prove its worth. Instead, it reveals itself through patience, observation, and the steady unfolding of events that confirm what was once only a possibility. When truth stands on its own foundation, it eventually reaches a point where even the loudest doubts cannot continue speaking against it. That is the moment when noise turns into silence, and resistance turns into recognition. The chosen one also learns that the power of their voice was never about proving others wrong. It was about maintaining integrity while navigating a world that often reacts before it understands. Your calm presence during earlier disagreements demonstrated something more powerful than argument. It showed that clarity can exist without aggression, and that confidence can remain grounded in humility. When people witnessed this balance repeatedly, they began seeing your voice not as a challenge to their authority, but as a resource for deeper awareness. This shift changed the dynamic of every conversation that followed. The room no longer reacted to your words with immediate skepticism, because the environment had already seen what happens when your observations are allowed to unfold through time. The Chosen One's journey, therefore, reveals a deeper truth about leadership and perception. Leadership does not always appear through titles, status, or the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes it appears through quiet accuracy that guides understanding when confusion begins spreading. The ability to recognize patterns early, express them thoughtfully, and remain patient while others catch up to that insight is a rare form of strength. It is the kind of strength that reshapes environments without needing to dominate them. Over time, the Chosen One discovers that their voice has become something more than a personal expression. It has become a reference point for clarity within the conversations around them. Yet the most important lesson within this experience is that the real power behind your voice was never the moment when others became speechless. The real power was the integrity that allowed you to remain steady even when no one else yet recognized what you saw. That steadiness created a foundation for everything that followed. Because you did not abandon your clarity during moments of doubt, truth eventually had the space it needed to reveal itself. And when it did, the environment naturally adjusted to that reality, without needing confrontation or victory. The noise faded because the truth spoke louder than any argument ever could. As the Chosen One moves forward, this understanding becomes a guiding principle. You realize that your role is not to silence others, but to remain aligned with what is real. When clarity and patience walk together, they create a presence that does not need to fight for recognition. The world eventually notices on its own. And when that moment arrives, when the room falls quiet and understanding settles into place, the Chosen One recognizes that the silence surrounding their voice is not emptiness. It is the sound of truth finally being heard.